Welcome to this week's Halacha Shir. It is entitled Endangering Oneself to Save Others, a very interesting topic and, as ever, connected to the coming week's Sedra. How is it connected to the Sedra? Let's see. If you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. The Pasuk says, Vayom Hashem el Moshe b'Midyan, Lech Shuv Mitzrayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu when he's in Midyan, go back to Mitzrayim, Ki meisu kol ha'anoshim ha'mavakshim es nafshecha. All the people who were after you, who were trying to kill you, have died. Says Rashi, who are they? Mihem, Doson va'aviram. The infamous Doson va'aviram. And Rashi points out, Chaim hoyu, they were actually alive, and Ashiyardu menichsehem, they had lost their money, they became poor, v'ha'oni choshev kameis, and a poor person is considered like a dead person, and that's why the Pasuk says, Kimeisu kol ha'anoshim, because they appear later on in the Torah. Now, the Meshech Chochmah makes a fascinating observation. Muchach, says the Meshech Chochmah, Remeh Simcha Dvinsk, D'im hoyu chaim, the implication is that if they were alive, Hamavakshim es nafshay, the obvious inference is that if they were alive, had they been alive, then Moshe Rabbeinu would not be obligated to go back to Mitzrayim. Even though the whole of the Jewish people need him, they don't need to put themselves into a situation of sakana. So there you have the connection to the Sedra. Says the Meshech Chochmah amazingly, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells Moshe Rabbeinu, go back to Mitzrayim, Lech Shuv Mitzrayim, Ki meisu kol ha'anoshim, says the Meshech Chochmah, you see from here, that had they not died, had they been alive, then he would not be under any obligation to go back, even though he's needed and it's an important job at hand, because he's not obligated lahachnis atzmei b'sakana, to put himself into a dangerous situation. Now, this whole topic of endangering oneself to save others is a fascinating halachic topic, and let's just give a bit of an overview as to what the situation is, and largely it's going to be based on the writings of Rabbi Weiss in the Minchas Osher. But let's give a bit of background first. The Beis Yosef, that's the starting point perhaps. The Beis Yosef, at the very end of Choshen Mishpat, in Siman Tov Chof Vov, I think it's the penultimate Siman in the whole of Choshen Mishpat, he quotes Yerushalmi. Says the Beis Yosef, this is of course Rabbi Yosef Cairo, writing in the Beis Yosef as follows. Yerushalmi, this is box number 2, Yerushalmi Masik, the Yerushalmi concludes, Afilu lahachnis atzme besofek sakona chayev, that even to put yourself into a situation of sofek sakona, you are obligated. To put yourself into a doubtful situation, you are obligated. Atkan v'nira, and it appears, says the Beis Yosef, shahatam, the reason is mipnei shahalo vadai v'hu sofek. In other words, you have to put yourself in a situation of sofek because this person is a vadai and you are a sofek, and therefore if the guy is, let's say, is imprisoned and you need to undertake a rescue mission, well, he is definitely in a situation, or he's drowning, he's in the sea and he can't swim and he's drowning, and for you it's a sofek. Says the Beis Yosef, well, for him it's a vadai that he's going to die, and for you it's a sofek, therefore you are obligated to try and incur a sofek situation in order to save him. For Kolham, he finishes off, for Kolham Mekayim Nefesh Achaz Misrael, Kilu Kiyim Olam Mole, quoting the Gemara in Sanhedrin, I think it's a Mishnah there, Kolham Mekayim Nefesh Achaz Misrael, Kilu Kiyim Olam Mole, that if you save one soul, it's as if you've saved the whole world, and therefore the Yerushalmi is of the opinion that you need to put yourself into a sofek sakana, a potentially fatal situation. It's doubtful whether it's going to be fatal or not, but you are obligated to put yourself in that situation. You're obligated to endanger yourself in order to save others. Now, the fascinating thing is that the Shulchan Aruch, written of course by the same author of the Beis Yosef, Rabbi Yosef Cairo, of course the background is that the Beis Yosef wrote a commentary on the Torah, as did the Ramah, the Darkei Moshe, and then both Rabbi Yosef Cairo and Rabbi Moshe Isserles, the Ramah, and the Shulchan Aruch, they both wrote the summaries, which became, for Rabbi Yosef Cairo, the Shulchan Aruch with the glosses of the Ramah of Rabbi Moshe Isserles. But amazingly, the Shulchan Aruch does not bring his own conclusion, or this Yerushalmi that he cites in the Beis Yosef, he doesn't bring it in Shulchan Aruch. How so? Take a look. This is the Shulchan Aruch writing Choshen Mishpat Siman Tov Chof Vov Sif Aleph. Haroyes chaver tover bayom. If someone sees his friend drowning in the sea, or listim bo'in olov, or a group of bandits threatening him, or a wild animal is attacking him, and he himself can save him, You can hire others to save him, and he doesn't. Concludes the Shulchan Aruch, he violates the transgression of the pasuk that says, you can't stand idly by whilst your brother's blood is being spilled. Now, that is talking about a situation where there's no sakana, but the situation where there would be a sakana, then no reference to, says the Shulchan Aruch, of you being obligated to put yourself in danger to save somebody else, not like the Yerushalmi that the Beis Yosef quotes. Now, interestingly, the Sma, one of the famous commentaries on the Shulchan Aruch, picks up on this, and that's the next box, the bottom of this third box. But Yerushalmi, Masik the Tzorech afilu lahachnisasim b'sofek sakana avur. The Sma quotes the Yerushalmi that a person is obligated to put himself in a doubtful situation of danger to save somebody else. Ve'hiviu Beis Yosef, and the Beis Yosef brings this for kosav v'nira sha'atam u'mipnei sha'halov v'adav u'sofek, like we mentioned. Gam zeh shmitu ha'mechaber. But here, the mechaber, i.e. the author of the Shulchan Aruch, omits it. He doesn't put it in the Shulchan Aruch. Or is Meish Mem Vav Reish Mem. Now I had to look up what that stands for, but I've got it in brackets there. It stands for Mereinu V'Rabbeinu Moshe, which of course is the Ramah. So Umeiram, i.e. the Ramah, Zal also, he doesn't put it in the Shulchan Aruch. So you see the Beis Yosef brings the Yerushalmi, but the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah do not. Now why not? Says the Sma, I'll tell you why the Shulchan Aruch omitted this. Because the classic Rishonim, the Rif, the Rambam and the Rosh, and the Tur do not bring this lahalacha, mishum hachi shmituhu gam kein, and therefore says the Sma. That's why the Shulchan Aruch omitted it. Now, it makes a bit of background that perhaps is necessary. The Shulchan Aruch writes in his Hagdama, what am I going to do? I'm writing a code of Jewish law. I'm writing a very clear guide of the do's and don'ts of Jewish life. But there are dozens of Rishonim. How do I decide which Rishonim to follow and which to leave out? So in his Hagdama he writes, I'm going to follow the majority of the three great Amudei HaRishonim. Who are they? The Rambam, the Rif, and the Rosh. That's why, by the way, there's like an inbuilt Sephardi majority, because the Rambam and the Rif are Sephardim, the Rosh, of course, is not. And the Ramah comes and redresses the balance by including the Rishonim such as Rashi and Tosfos, Ashkenazi Rishonim. But if the Rambam, the Rif, and the Rosh, and of course the Tur, leave out this halacha that a person is not obligated to endanger oneself to save others, that you're not obligated to put yourself into a sofek sakana to save others, then that's why the Shulchan Aruch omitted it. But he did bring the Shitta in the Beis Yosef. Now, what happens? What's the halacha l'maisa? The Shulchan Aruch leaves it out, but do we reckon with this Yerushalmi or not? And the debate continues. The Minchas Osher brings, if you look in the bottom box of the page 3, box number 3, paragraph number 3, he says, this is the Minchas Osher in Chelik Aleph Siman Kuf Tes Vav, in the Sfarim, it's in Ayin Omid Shin Tzadi Gimel, page 393. He says this, B'she'ela zu, im yeshchiv al odom listakin kadei l'hatzil acherim. If a person is obligated to put himself in danger to save others, kvar nechleku gedolei ha-poskim. This is actually a well-trodden area, and the gedolei poskim debate it. Ki yodua b'siman tov chavav v'chishin mishpat ha-Beis Yosef hevi shamesh Yerushalmi. Like I mentioned, the Beis Yosef quotes the Yerushalmi to chayav odom lachnisasim b'sofek, that a person is obligated to put himself in a situation of sofek sakona kadei l'hatzlis chaver, in order to save his friend, misakona gemura, from a certain danger. Ach b'Shulchan Aruch lo yehetzik halacha zu. But the Shulchan Aruch does not cite this halacha. V'hasma sham, which is what I just quoted, kasav de be'emes ein daite kach lahalacha lefichach lekos v'halacha zu b'Shulchan Aruch, that this is not the concluding view of the Shulchan Aruch for the reasons we said, because the Rambam, the Rif, and the Rosh and the Torah don't mention it, and therefore that's why the Shulchan Aruch omitted it. Omno. However, says the Minchas Osher, however, the later Achronim debate this. The Netziv. So amazingly, the Netziv, in his Hemek Sheila, and his writing on the Shiltas, and the Tiferes Yisrael, the famous commentary of on Mishnayos, they actually permit a person to choose to put himself in a sofek sakana, into danger, in order to save somebody who is in certain danger. However, he also then quotes the Radvaz and Reb Moshe, who say not. And the Minchas Osher goes and brings a proof from the Yerushalmi. Now, I think this could be the source of Yerushalmi, I'm not sure, but the Minchas Asher, it's in, he quotes it here. If you take a look at the top of the next page, says Rabbi Asher, I've got a wonderful raya, clear raya from the Yerushalmi. What is the raya? B'Maseches Trumas, Mishnah Zayin Amud Aleph, Mem Zayin Amud Aleph. Rav Imi Itzid Besifsefei. That one time Rab Imi was captured. Omer Rabbi Yonason Yichri Chameis Besadinai. I.e., Rabbi Yonason says we better prepare tachrichim for him because Rav Imi has been captured. He's certainly going to die. Let's prepare the tachrichim, the burial shrouds, because he's gone. Omer Reb Shimon ben Lakish, Rish Lakish says Ad da ana kotel ana miskatel, which means I'm going to go and try and save him. Either I will kill them or I will be killed. Ana ezel mishvazle b'chayle, and I'm going to go and save him with force. So you see, the Reish Lakish put himself into danger in order to save his friend from a certain danger. And in the end, the story was he did save him, and Reish Lakish was not injured in any way. So you see, it says Rabbi Asher, I've got a great raya from this Yerushalmi, and then he concludes with something astonishing. He says, "V'chidish otzim kasu b'zeh bal ha'archaim." The great Or Chaim HaKadosh, in one of his Sfarim called Rishon LeZion, writes, and also in the Halachas Katanas, which is both this sort of 17th century around then, the Afshir Rabbi Akiva limet chayecha kodim l'chayv chavercha. There's a well-known Gemara. The Gemara in Bab Metzia says that Rabbi Akiva is of the opinion that chayecha kodim l'chayv chavercha. That's the famous case where you've got two people walking, and they're in a desert, and they're parched, they're desperately looking for a drink, and they've only got one bottle of water, which is enough for one of them, but not enough for both of them. So what happens? So Rabbi Akiva says, Chayecha koidmin, you come first. Says the Rabbi Asher, quoting the Or Chaim and the Halachas Katanas, that Ein ze ele heta avaloi chayva. That when it says that you can drink it, or you should drink it, normally it's understood to mean you've got a chiyuv to drink it, to save yourself, and to ignore your friends. Says, quoting these two people, that Ein ze ele heta avaloi chayva. It's not an obligation, that it's mutter for you to drink the water. It's permitted for you to drink it, but not that you're obligated to do it. But if you want to give it to your friend, and that means you dying so that your friend can survive, then you're entitled to do that. But that is not the mainstream view. The mainstream view is that there is a chayv for you to save yourself if it means you would die if you wouldn't have this drink of water, or whatever the scenario would be. So, before we come up to the final conclusion, what's the story so far? The story is that there seems to be a debate regarding whether you can put yourself into a situation of danger in order to save another person in certain danger. The Minchas Asher quotes the Netziv and the Tiferet Yisrael who permit it. However, the Radvaz and Moshe Feinstein do not permit it. And this is a very common situation. You can find in all types of situations. It could be medical situations. This, he mentions himself, Rabbi Asher, this, could relate to various organ donations. So in the early days of kidney transplants, where it was an element of danger, this would be a relevant discussion. Putting yourself in a case of sakon in order to save somebody else who could be in very serious danger. Now, of course, it's much less. It's not really dangerous anymore, and therefore there's not really a risk for a person to do it in normal situations. And lots of different situations. For example, in military situations, undertaking some sort of rescue mission or various army exercise or operation in order to save somebody or to infiltrate enemy lines or whatever it may be. Putting yourself in sofek sakana to save others from certain danger. This is exactly this topic. So that's really the story so far. Now, the Minchas Asher concludes with an important postscript. He says this is in the penultimate box on the page. Ach yesoid gadol kosav bezeh b'shayla shuvas haradvaz in chelek siman aleph tov kuf pei beis the shayla zu tuluya b'midas hasikun. It all depends on the degree of danger that you're putting yourself into. Sha'al hamatzil dimnoite yosel hatzola midas chasidusu. That if then it's very likely that he's going to succeed in this rescue mission or in saving the person, whatever the situation is, then it's fine that it's a midas chasidus, it's a very fine thing to do. But if it's a very dangerous situation, then so it depends with the degree of danger. For example, a person could fall into into the sea. He goes overboard, or he's swimming and he's floundering, and it's deep water and it's very, very cold. So for you to go in, what degree of danger is there? If you're a very strong swimmer and you're used to it, and it's not, then there's little danger. Then it's a midas chasidus. You're not obligated, but it's a midas chasidus to do it. But if it's more leaning towards you also drowning, then also listakin, he says, concludes the Radvaz. For Kvar Kasavti b'makom acher concludes the Minchas Osha. Tekach nagu lefi legabe trumas kloyas regarding kidney donations. For Hashtalz Mayach Atzomas, for example, bone marrow donations and transplants. Ta'af she'em b'zeh chiyuv mikol makom midas chasidus shebnei mishpacha yisrum. There is certainly a midas chasidus, and to do that because the danger is very, very limited in that situation, in normal situations. And then just to conclude with the Aruch HaShulchan, the last box on the page, which makes the same point really. This was our starting point, the Yerushalmi that the Beis Yosef quotes. And says the Aruch HaShulchan that the Talmud Bavli does not conclude like the Yerushalmi, and that's why the Rishonim leave out the Rambam, the Rif, the Rosh, the Tur, etc. all leave it out. Umiu hakol lefi inyan, says the Aruch HaShulchan, the important postscript. It all depends on the situation at hand. V'yesh lishkol ha'inyan bepeles, a person has got to weigh it up with very, very sort of accurate scales. V'lo lishmer es atzma yosim midai, and he shouldn't say I can't take any risks at all. He shouldn't be too overcautious. That you need an element of risk, but on the other hand, you need that balance. So a very interesting framework regarding a very common situation. So just to summarize, what is the connection with endangering oneself to save others to this week's parasha? The connection is a good connection. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Moshe Rabbeinu, you go back to Mitzrayim, ki meisu kol hanoshim hamavakshim es nafshecha, says the Meshech Chochmah. I see from here that if they wouldn't have died, then you can't go back. You can't put yourself in a situation of danger. The Beis Yosef brings the Yerushalmi that a person is obligated, he is obligated to put himself into some degree of danger to save somebody else who's in absolute danger. However, the Shulchan Aruch, in his Shulchan Aruch, the Rabbi Yosef Karo does not bring that. Explains the Sma because the Rambam, the Rif, the Rosh, and the Tur do not bring it. Like the Aruch HaShulchan says, that is not the conclusion of the Talmud Bavli, and this is debated amongst the Achronim. The Netziv, the Tiferes Yisrael permits it. On the other hand, the Radvaz, Ramosha, says that a person should not put himself in danger in these sort of situations. The Minchas Osha does conclude with a raya from the Yerushalmi, and it says, like the Aruch HaShulchan says, that each situation needs to be weighed up exactly what the risk is. Not that there's a chiyuv, but a person should be careful not to say that I can't take any risks whatsoever, but each situation needs to be weighed up very carefully.